Zombies are representative of Alzheimer's, this terrifying disease.
Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Jewish Museum of the American West, and Atheists United Studios. Hey, Joey. Alzheimer's is usually a private struggle, one that deeply affects the individual and those closest to them, but is often met with isolation and social stigma from those outside that inner circle. A new comics project by today's guests gives us an intimate, first-hand account of daily life with this degenerative disease.
We're delighted to chat with Eric Glickman and Stephen Hersh, whose ongoing series, How to Lose Your Mind, a comics project about friendship, memories, and Alzheimer's disease, documents Stephen's experiences with Alzheimer's. Eric and Stephen, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
You first met each other in 1986 when you were both working in advertising. Could you tell us about your friendship over the years?
We started in 1986 at an agency that was called Dancer Fitzgerald Sample, which was one of those old, venerable ad agencies back in the day, probably at the very tail end of the Mad Men era. We worked in the Chrysler building, which was...
We thought it was so cool.
Yeah, it was pretty unbelievable. Hard to be in a bad mood when you got into those elevators in the morning, even though you were dragging your ass. And we were both part of sort of a prestigious training program that they had at that agency at the time. They trained copywriters and art directors, bringing in 5 or 6 every 6 months. I started 6 months before Stephen did. And when he arrived, they put him in the office with me. We had a sort of a makeshift storage room that was our office.
But we loved it. It was a really cool office.
It was a little cool space, but it really was a storage room that they stuck us in. And according to Stephen, the first thing that I ever said
was, "Don't touch my things,"
which
he thinks he doesn't. I didn't say it, but I did.
I'm not sure that I said it, but I believe him that I did say it. And we started working together in advertising. We sort of immediately clicked creatively. We sort of shared the same sense of humor. We sort of shared the same attitude about advertising, which was kind of a good way for us to make a living, but we didn't love it. It wasn't something that we loved. We actually liked kind of selling products. We enjoyed that part of it. We didn't care about necessarily winning awards or anything like that. We kind of liked when our ads went on the air and we would see an uptick in sales. We're like, ooh, we got into people's minds. That's cool. That was fun for us. And so we were at that agency for 4 years. We made a quick stop at a second agency for a year exactly. And then we spent the bulk of our time at Young and Rubicam, another Madison Avenue advertising agency, for 25 years. So working together as a team for that long is highly unusual in advertising. That is not the way it goes. And actually, staying at one agency for 25 years is incredibly unusual. Most people either get kicked to the curb, they break up as a team. I mean, it's hard to keep creatives together. The Beatles split up. Those things happen. So, but we stayed together because really, I think our partnership was what made us like being in advertising. It's long hours trying to be creative together and sort of struggling to keep your work at least having some integrity.
And we hated it equally. That helped a lot.
I was able to hide it better than than Stephen could.
That's true.
But by the end, we would introduce ourselves to a new client by saying, we're like an old married couple, except we still have sex. And that line always went over pretty well. So, and when you spend that long, sitting with each other for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, you become friends. You talk about your family, your kids. I mean, I was through many of Stephen's girlfriends before he met his awesome wife Dana. Um, and we just became really great friends. I think creating together just gave us this bond that we had, and we did other projects outside of it. We wrote plays and we wrote screenplays that didn't go anywhere, and we wrote comics that didn't go anywhere, but we liked creating together, and so that was the fun of it.
We actually just did a play, our first play together. Um, f- uh, what was it called?
Son of Young Frankenstein.
Son of yeah, and it was his first ever. I've done about 7 or 8, but it was really fun. We had a good time.
Yeah, so Stephen basically at one point, and this is probably 10 months ago or something, said, I'd still like to write another play. And I didn't know that that was even a possibility. But he came to me a couple months ago and he said the place that the collaborative theater that I wrote plays for, they have a call for some original 10-minute plays that are based around Halloween and spooky season. And then he drops it on me. He goes, "Oh, and it's due in 2 days." He's like, "I'm bad at checking my emails. I didn't notice it. I didn't see it." I was like, "Fine, we're gonna do this. Let's try to do it." And we went for, a walk in the woods. We live by woods and we often go for walks and just talk about things. And that's where a lot of our subject matter comes from. And we brainstormed the concept around Halloween. And I think our minds immediately went to trying to do something around Alzheimer's. And we thought about brains. And as soon as we thought about brains, we thought about Abby Normal and Young Frankenstein. And we came up with this concept in which Dr. Frankenstein needs to get a brain, and it's revealed during the play that the brain is needed because he has Alzheimer's himself, and that he's developed this operation which will cure his Alzheimer's. So it's really fun, and in the same way that our comics are fun, it's kind of taking the piss out of the situation, and yet it's still dealing with this bigger issue of how to cure Alzheimer's, and if you have it, wanting to find some way for it to be fixed. And so, um, it just did a run of eight productions, and it was really good and a lot of fun. So that's part of this project. I will do a comic about the play itself and how it related to what we were doing, and it was cool to write a play together after all this time. So
And it's kind of what we're doing now. We want to have fun. I mean, it's Alzheimer's is horrible. I hate it, but the way to make it good is enjoy it. It's about being. What is it? What did I say before? Um,
you think it's interesting, actually.
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean it's horrible, but it is very interesting what's happening, and we're working with that.
Yeah, and Steven's really just open to sharing what is going on with him. And it's sort of made it better for Steven, and it made it better for everybody who's around him. He's very open to, um, I mean, way back, uh, years ago already. Now we've been doing this project for like 2.5 years, but I said to him, "Do you want me to guess the word that you're trying to say, fill in that word, or would you like to work it through it and try to figure it out?" He's like, "No, tell me what I'm trying to say." I don't.
That, that's a good way to talk. I would have never have talked to him if he couldn't help me, and
Right.
that's how it is with people. I ask, please help me, and then we can have a conversation.
Right.
And people are, it's a new thing. I think a lot of people. I think older people don't they don't do that kind of stuff. They hide a lot of things, and I've decided not to, and I think it's much better, and it's just much better.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe.
Early on in How to Lose Your Mind, Stephen asks Eric, "Will you document my demise?" To which Eric replies, "I thought you'd never ask." Is this more or less how the project came about?
I think that's sort of the end of the beginning is what that is. That's kind of the end of the beginning. The project really started in July of 2023. I went to the Center for Cartoon Studies, which is in this tiny town of White River Junction in Vermont, and I took a 5-day workshop up there. So I had a little studio Airbnb, and I was taking a course that was called a workshop that was called Graphic Resiliency with a cartoonist named Natalie Norris, and basically this was focused on using the art of cartooning to tell very personal stories about adversity or illness and sort of survival and resiliency in the face of these things. And I don't think that we had fully dealt with it. I knew Stephen had Alzheimer's, but I think I wanted to try to figure out a way to think about how I was feeling about it.
It was the very early time when I got it.
Right. It was only months after he had told me. And so I think I just wanted to try to process my emotions through this comic making. And so, I actually woke up very early in the morning and would arrive at the studio. They'd give us a key to the studio. I arrived at 7 in the morning and I do the classes, but then I'd be there till after midnight every night. I was very invested in trying to figure out how to tell this story. And it's interesting when you're making comics, you're sort of like reliving the experience over and over. First, you're doing really quick doodles and you're making quick notes, and then you're sort of refining them down to pencils, and then you're inking them. And sort of each time you're doing it, you're experiencing the moment and the emotions and the things that you're feeling. And so it was pretty intense for me. And I came back from it and I was really nervous to show Stephen the comic, to be honest. I didn't want it to feel like, this is all I think about. I didn't want him to feel self-conscious about how I was feeling about it. So I told him that I was going to email it to him, and that was it. I couldn't personally watch him read it. Would have freaked me out. And he calls me the next day and he's like, we loved it, meaning him and his wife. We both cried. I was like, yeah, that's what I couldn't deal with. And and then about a week or so, 2 weeks after that, he calls me up and he said he wanted to talk to me. We went to the bar that we used to always hung out at. And he basically, said that,
I said, well, it happened after. I'm not tell a whole story, but it happened after a thing with my wife. We went to we went to a place and
a big event.
and it made me think of a lot of things. And I thought, when I woke up the next day, I talked to my wife, and I said, I don't want to be, have a.
You don't want your life to be.
I don't want to be, my life to be sad. I want it to be interesting. And I think, and I wanted to, I want to be interesting. I don't want to be, bleh. So, that's when I talked to,
Yeah. So
she said, I told him about,
he said, I have this idea and I'd like you to document my demise. That's what he said, which is the way that he phrases things. And I knew what he meant. And I kind of, in my head, I was thinking, I thought you'd never ask. I don't think I would have ever said I wanted to do it. But if he came to me with that idea, I was all for it. And so at that point, we just started trying to figure out how to document what was going on. And we just hang out a lot, once a week, usually. As I said, at that point, we used to hang out at a bar. Now we go for walks and, in the woods where we live and everything. And we just talk about our day and what's going on. And Stephen tells me what he's thinking, how he's feeling, what's going on, little incidences.
not only that,
Write things
I,
down.
I do it. I write a lot.
He writes things down.
I sent him a lot of stuff.
Right. So often we'll talk about something and I'll take some notes on my phone about it. I'll go home and write some stuff down. But then I'll also tell Stephen, I'll ask Stephen, I said, can you write about that a little bit more? Just write a little bit more about what we talked about. And he's really into doing that. He's always been a writer on multiple levels, from a copywriter to a cartoonist. He had a syndicated comic strip back in the 90s, written plays and musical lyrics and things like that. So that really gives him a purpose. And he'll send me whatever he's written and I keep the notes, and then I try to figure out a way to sort of take the experience and translate it into a comic. Use the sort of muscles of comics, the different muscles that comics can do, to sort of capture the truth of what he's trying to say.
Right. And it often is funny, and it often ends with not being funny, but that's how it is. So, and it works for us.
Eric, I know your previous project was pretty massive, the Camp Pakawakni and Dynamite Summer of '77. And that was much different in a sense that it was a retrospective, nostalgic kind of project. Now you're doing something that's documenting life as it happens. What has been your experience sort of comparing those two types of comic projects?
Well, I think this one has challenges in that I'm really trying to be a documentarian, almost like if you think about a documentary filmmaker, I'm trying to do that, but through comics. And time is definitely an issue with this, and I want to capture things as they're happening. It's interesting. Stephen and I have talked about this. We'll look back at comics that were done 2 years ago, and I say to him, I'm like, I'm glad we captured that exactly when we did, because I think it would be very hard to, even if I had notes about it and written down things, to draw a comic about it and not inject how I feel about these things now. And so I think as it moves along, I'm really trying to capture how Steven's feeling in the moment, how I'm feeling about the situation in the moment. Drawing comics is really time consuming. It takes me a long time to figure out how to lay it out, how to, what is the style that this comic needs to have. And so it's a challenge. I think the other one didn't have a time frame on it. I could do it as I needed to. And I could also form the story the way that I wanted to, whereas this one, I'm really trying to capture the way it is, whether I like it or not, I think is a lot of the struggle.
The stories mix humor and sadness in a very effective way. Did you have any concerns about exploring such a sensitive topic in a whimsical illustrated format?
I didn't. I thought it's just telling the story, and as I keep saying, it's an interesting story. It's not a happy story, but it's interesting, and it's worth talking about, and people are interested in it. And we've seen a lot of people who we talked to, and they said, "I've never seen this, and this is important. They all say this is a really important thing that you guys are doing," and I believe that, and yeah.
So, and I think, the style that we chose, I think, is meant to reflect us. It's as much a story about our friendship it is about Alzheimer's, really. I mean, we're just using Alzheimer's as the sort of means to tell this story. And our relationship is built on, humor and a sense of humor. And, we had a boss in advertising way back when who used to always say, you don't need to be somber to be serious. And we used to always use that line to a client, when we did a funny commercial about their product, didn't mean we weren't being serious. And I think in the same way, this story can be told with humor because there is humor within it all, and our relationship is built on a sense of humor. And so when we tell the story, we felt like that is the right way to do it.
How to Lose Your Mind includes stories behind the stories. You take us through an event, tell us how you're planning to depict it, and then present that depiction. This meta storytelling seems rather appropriate for the material. What inspired you to take this approach?
Well, I love that you think that it's appropriate. I think it is working really well. I don't know that we knew we were going to do it this way to start, but the question does again reflect even on the thing that we just said, that our relationship is built on a sense of humor. And I think meta humor was always something that we both enjoyed a lot. The old David Letterman show was incredibly meta. I think about, Annie Hall and Marshall McLuhan pulling him out of the line and speaking directly to the camera is very meta. That's Ferris Bueller's Day Off was one of our favorite films. Again, breaking that fourth wall. And even in advertising, just the concept of a spokesperson who speaks directly to camera, it's meta in a strange way. I think that as we took a lot of notes at the beginning. We're trying to figure out what we were doing, and it just started to seem like we should show ourselves talking about what's going on and then try to represent that story in a way. And so it started to become meta, and we're like, whoa, this is interesting. Again, I think we were trying to reflect. We saw that in our brief for this project. In advertising, you always get a brief, and I think at the very beginning, Stephen and I said to each other, like, interesting and fun. Those should be our sort of guiding principles. And so, doing it in this meta way sort of rolled out naturally. I don't think we thought about it at first, but it seems to work, and so we're continuing with that.
Eric, you have a terrific eye for layouts. Is that something you developed in your advertising career?
I guess it had to have been. I was started as an art director and a graphic designer, and figuring out how to um, fill the page in the right way and tell the story and bring people's attention in an ad is certainly a thing that I had to do. On top of that, did a lot of storyboarding, and storyboarding for commercials is very similar to, creating comics. You have a bunch of little squares and you're kind of like, this will happen in this moment and this will happen in this next moment. And people have to be able to kind of like, close the gap between those two things, moment A and moment B. What happened in there? And so I became very good at that. And I think also in advertising, we figured out how to, work in very tiny boxes. We kind of figured out how you have 30 seconds to tell a story. And later in our careers, it was 15 seconds to tell a story.
Yeah, I think in addition to the layouts, just the way that you use a lot of white space and sort of focus us on the characters, and there's not a lot to distract. There aren't a lot of comics that do that effectively. I'm wondering if you have inspirations in the comic book world that you're drawing on.
My biggest inspiration is Charles Schulz. So, really, he worked in it. And look, in fact, I'm wearing it brown on my shirt at the moment. I didn't even notice that until I said that. But yeah, that was working in tiny spaces, and had to use your lines very judiciously and focus on both character and words, and figure out how to do that. And then I think, like Joey was saying, a little bit of the advertising comes in. Negative space is a big thing in an ad to help focus the eye and things like that. So I bet a lot of that's seeping in also. But I would say Peanuts more than anything is my. I mean, every emotion was captured in those strips, and it was really done very efficiently with minimal lines and space. And so I think that's probably stuck with me.
And there's a moment in the comic as well where you become Peanuts characters.
So I think, when we started the project, I said that I was going to draw in all different styles throughout the whole thing. I was going to do super detailed drawings, and I was going to do more cartoony things. There are times that I draw in the style of Steven's comic strip from the mid 90s, which is called Bliss. And so that's really fun. I'm drawing in his style. But there was a story that Steven was telling me about the trouble that he was having with talking to a client on the phone, and that it was incredibly difficult to talk to one of his customers on the phone. And
I mean, I couldn't do it anymore.
Did he-
Yeah, they knew that there was something wrong with me.
he didn't think it was a good way to represent the company, and so he's kind of going to let go of talking to customers on the phone. And I was thinking about the story, and it just felt like, Charlie Brown and Linus at the thinking wall to me, like the way the conversation was evolving. And I was like, oh, this is a good little way to draw this story, to have it added an extra layer to what was going on. It wasn't just the conversation. It was really this deeper conversation, again, which Charles Schulz is able to capture in Peanuts, that was really fun. And then when I thought, oh, and I'm going to call it walnuts instead of peanuts, and the fact that a walnut looks like a brain was just too unbelievable. So I drew this little picture of Steven's head, almost as a walnut breaking open, and the brain inside was being seen. And I thought, wow, this is. And then I got to say featuring good old Stephen Hersh, which was also fabulous, because that's what he is to be, good old Stephen Hersh. So yeah, I've been trying to sort of like riff on other cartoonists or other styles throughout, because I found that each story, um, maybe requires a different way, a drawing style to tell it, to give it the most power that it could have. And why limit myself to one style? I think it also keeps it interesting, which is again another one of her words, interesting and fun for both the reader and for myself. And then on top of it, I also think that in some way it reflects Stephen's experience, which is sort of kaleidoscopic in a lot of ways. And so by showing different art styles, it's just sort of reflecting the different ways that his experiences are sort of his reality kind of is in some ways. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of, you like that, right?
I do.
One of the scenes that really got to me is when Stephen's on an airplane with his wife and he can't figure out how to unbuckle his safety belt. It ends with Stephen, drawn as a child, saying, "It was awful. I felt like a baby." What can readers learn from glimpsing these daily challenges?
I do like that comic a lot. The thing that was interesting about that specifically is I connected that comic to another story that Stephen had told me months earlier. And that story that he had told me was about him building a Lego set with his daughter-in-law. And he ended telling me the story. This was just him talking to me. He said, it was kind of great. I felt like a little kid, and it was a very positive kind of feeling that he had from doing this project. And then months later, he tells me this story about not being able to unbuckle a seatbelt on an airplane and said it was horrible. I felt like a baby, and I decided to put these two comics together because I felt like they were, two sides of the same coin, and that I was sharing an insight that Stephen was expressing to me of sort of good and bad about the experience.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I couldn't, in the first one, I couldn't, I thought I could do the things that she was doing and I couldn't. So she was helping me and I felt like a little kid. But
In a positive way.
yeah, because I love my, whatever,
Daughter.
daughter-in-law. And it was just the two of us and we were having a good time and it just felt very cute. And then on the other one, it was horrible. But actually, now I can always, I've learned how to open it up myself.
And I think, no, I don't know what people can learn from, seeing glimpses into these daily things. That's not our intent necessarily. And it's interesting when people read some of our comics, they get different things from them. Like, I shouldn't complain about my life because it could be so much worse. Perseverance or having a positive attitude is a good thing. So people come up with all these things that aren't necessarily our intention. We did another comic about Stephen stopping doing Wordle, and people, to me, it was just an interesting story about a daily event that almost everybody does, and Stephen deciding not to do it anymore because he really couldn't. And a lot of people came back and said, this is a story about acceptance. And I was like, well, I love that you got that out of it, but I'm not really sure that that was what we were trying to say or not. I think
We were upset about it. A lot of people. This is so sad.
yeah, right.
For me, it was just making my life easier because it took me so long to do it Wordle after a while. So I
Right.
just
Right. That was the other response. Yeah, a lot of people were really sad by that one. I was like, wow, that's so interesting that that one made them so sad, the Wordle comic. So I don't know what we think people will learn from this. I actually think the most important thing to us is that they get a sense of us and our friendship and us sort of being present and being there for each other and just sort of like living life in the moment because the moments are fleeting and we're more hyper aware of that than probably most people are. So I think that's what we're trying to reflect. And I think by doing these comics, it's allowing us to be more present. We're really we're being aware of what's happening in a lot of different moments because we have to for the project. And and when you spend time with a comic and writing it over and over, it makes you be really, really there and hyper aware of what's happening in your life, which has been good for us. I think it's been great. I mean, how's the project for you really? What has it meant to you to do it?
well, partially it, it, I don't know what I would do right now if I didn't have this. I would be very sad. I don't know. I would probably try to write, but I don't know what I would write. This is making me write every day. So that's really good for me. So it's just, I don't know. I don't, it's going to happen. So you can either be sad or live your life. And that's what I've chosen to do. And so far it's working. I mean, eventually it won't be working as well, but that'll come, whatever. We all have to live and we all have to die.
So, how can our audience become your audience, or how can our audience follow How to Lose Your Mind?
So we have a Substack set up. It's at howtoloseyourmindcomics.substack.com. That's the best way to follow along with what we're doing. People can also follow me on Instagram at Glick23. I'm also sharing a lot of what's going on with the project there.
Terrific. And thanks so much, Eric and Stephen, for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, this has been great. We really appreciate it.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.